Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ground and Pound Podcast, a show where, as always, we're hitting you with them elbows of knowledge. And UFC Fight Night, Bonfim taking on Brown is heading to you this Saturday. And as always, we're here on the Ground and Pound Podcast to break it all down for you, starting off in the early prelims, heading to the main event. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Carlos. What's happening, Carlos?
Absolutely nothing, brother.
And we're going to dive right in for the early prelim opener of Robert Valentin taking on Jackson McVey. Carlos, who you got in this middleweight bout?
As we're talking right now, I feel like I kind of want to change it, but I'm going to go with who I had, and I'm going to go with Valentin. And pretty much like he's a bit more experienced. Although I think they both bring the same amount of toughness to the game. I think McVey is, you know, I know he's new. He didn't get the win the last time, but I feel like there's a little bit of grit and toughness that he has, that Valentin has too, and he also is struggling for a win. And I think that mentally, though, I think Valentin has got that little bit of an edge because I think there's something he can do that McVey hasn't seen, or maybe he could push the pace, or get him to get tired, get him to make a mistake. Although McVey, he's very tall for the weight class. That might give Valentin some problems. The strikes coming from different angles. When he loops his hooks, they're coming from a lot longer out. He might not notice when they're getting there. And he can for the most part, I think that Valentin is gonna be able to win some of the scrambles. You know what I mean? I think that that's where there might be an issue. I think on the feet, I think if it stays on there, I think McVey could probably get the best of him. But I think Valentin could probably get him to the clinch, get him, get him grappling with him, and get him to the ground somehow. And even if he ends up on the bottom, win the scramble. And I don't think he's going to get a submission. I don't think he's going to get a knockout on him, even though Valentin probably has a few more tricks than McVey. I just think that he's going to squeak out a decision, if anything. But I do like McVey in this one, but I'm going to take Valentin. I'm going to go with the wily veteran.
Yeah, I flip flopped on this one all week too. This one's tough for me. I'm also going to go with Robert Valentin only because of the fact that I think his career is on the line here in the UFC. Obviously, we just saw Jackson McVey take on Bruno Ferreira and obviously get submitted in the first round. But this is tough to me because when you look at Valentin, obviously, 0-3 now in the UFC, you're losing to guys like Torres, Finney, getting knocked out by Gutierrez, but these all are established names inside the UFC. Valentin, obviously, losing in the final to Ryan Loder of the Ultimate Fighter, but he had to be able to get there at some point. So we know that he's got skills. We know that he can wrestle a little bit. He's obviously very unorthodox, very, unusual guy when you talk about his personality too. He can strike. I do think that McVey's probably got the speed advantage here, but what we know about McVey is that he can knock out guys on the regional scene early in round one, but he's not proven to be UFC level. So until he proves that, I've got to go with Robert Valentin. I do think that McVey is going to be live here early for a first round finish, whether it be on the ground or whether it be on the feet, most likely on the feet. I do think that he's going to have that speed advantage in the striking, especially early. When you look at Valentin, though, obviously he has been finished recently, but they're against big power punches, like I mentioned with Gutierrez, which was kind of set up. It was kind of written in the stars there, I believe, in that matchup. I don't think that McVey has that same sort of power. So I think Valentin early, if he minds his p's and q's, maybe mixes in some wrestling, kind of zaps on the gas tank here of Jackson McVey. I think he knows that this is going to be important for him in terms of his career inside the UFC, and I think that he's going to be able to get this one done. He's got a little bit more experience in terms of MMA as well as higher level of competition. Give me Robert Valentin here to get this one done. Just kind of mixing in an array of a little bit more grappling. Like Carlos said, he also can scramble. I think he's probably the better scrambler and proven to be, especially at a higher level. Give me Robert Valentin to get this one done. Not confident, though, I do have to say. Not confident. But when I am a little bit more confident here, we have Daniel Marcos taking on Miles Johns. Carlos, who you got in this matchup?
Um, I had to go with Daniel Marcos in this one. He's the more technical striker. He's defensively very sound, keeps a high guard, will jab, uses reach with his legs actually to keep his opponents at bay. Will attack with his leg. Uh, Good movement, small subtle movements. Um, He's got good takedown defense too. He's going to need it if Johns wants to try to take this to the ground. But I think that he. I know they talk about Miles Johns having some big power, but he does like overswing when he swings. He swings with everything, kind of looping. I think Marcos has a little bit more power when it comes to proprioception. He can come down the middle a little stronger, a little shorter, and get to the target before Johns gets to him. And he's had an effect on some of his past opponents. So I don't think that the power lies with Johns. I think it probably tends to lean toward more with Marcos. I think he could be a little bit more accurate. I think he's a little bit more intelligent, a little bit more tactical. And with Johns, if he were to actually implement some wrestling, I think that would help him a little bit more if he would stop swinging a little wild and, with every ounce of power that he's got and looping, that would help him out too. But that's not how he fights. And he's going to come in there and he did used to try to get you to the ground. He fell in love with getting a couple knockouts. I think he got like two or three against some lower tier fighters, and it's great to get the fight over early. It's great not to breathe heavy and not get tired. But when you're looking for that knockout, you got to fight someone who's a little reckless, and Marcos is not reckless. He's going to see it coming, and I think that's who's going to get it done.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I feel fairly decent about Daniel Marcos here. Obviously, coming off that loss to Montel Jackson, where we saw him turn into a Dagestani wrestler in that one. Marcos was relentlessly shooting for takedowns, which has not been his game up until this point inside the UFC. Obviously, breaking his win streak up until this point. But my whole, I don't want to say Miles Johns is a bad fighter, but I do think when it comes to the striking, I completely agree with Carlos. He tends to load up on one big shot. It's not set up by a jab, right hand, or he literally just swings a wild right looping overhand. And I think Daniel Marcos is far, far, far more superior when it comes to the striking in terms of setting up his shots, mixing in the targets. He's going to chew up your lead leg with calf kicks. He's going to set up his shots. He's going to throw combinations. And realistically, all Marcos has to worry about here is the big looping right hand here from Johns. And I will say, when we broke his last fight down against Matsumoto, I was actually surprised at how competitive Miles Johns was in that fight. My biggest out with him is that he doesn't tend to throw a lot of volume because he likes to load up on that one shot. Well, he proved me wrong in that fight, and he threw a lot more volume. So I think depending on which Miles Johns shows up here, the one that falls in love with the right hand that only throws one shot at a time, Daniel Marcos will run through that Miles Johns. If he kind of mixes in the wrestling, like Carlos said, looking to at least feint the level change, it gives Marcos something to think about. That might be a path that's going to be able to help him lead to setting up bigger shots. If he's able to get a little bit more volume off as well, I do think that that's something that he needs to consider in this matchup, even if it's just scoring, chewing up the lead leg of Marcos. But I think Marcos is far too technical. I think that he's also proven in previous fights as well that he can bite down on his mouthpiece, put up volume, be a little bit gritty, be in a little bit more of a firefight. And he's also shown in his previous fight that he will mix in wrestling. He's trying to at least, kind of consider it in his MMA game, even though he's been more of a striker and a kickboxer up until this point. I like that from Marcos. Obviously, now he's broken his losing streak. We'll see if his kind of confidence gets, shaken by that. But he looked like a wrestler in his previous fight. He's shown to be a kickboxer in his previous fight. Sometimes he's also shown that he can brawl as well and trade in the pocket. So he's shown toughness, he's shown cardio, he's shown wrestling. I think he can mix it all in here and ultimately beat a guy in Miles Johns that really just looks for the right hand. But if the Miles Johns of last fight shows up, I think this could be a little bit more competitive, but I still got Daniel Marcos to get this one done. And next up, we have Tisha Pennington taking on Denise Gomes. Carlos, who you got in this one?
I'm gonna have to take Gomes. I think she's gonna be more physical than the two. She's technical because on her way in, she's a little bit more technical, but once she gets inside, she swings with reckless abandon. So she's technical, she's wild, she's aggressive, which is a good mix. It's a little fun, a little destructive, not a problem. I'm a fan of that. Gomes is always trying to bully her opponents, and it's not that Tisha's going to be so difficult to bully. It's just doesn't really cut the she doesn't really cut the cage. She doesn't get her opponent's cornered. She'll chase. You know what I mean? She'll follow you down. She'll hunt you down and like chase you and try to hit you on the move. Pennington's always moving. She's always bouncing somewhere. So it would be good for her to try to at least get her in the clinch up against the cage or just the clinch in general, get her in one spot. And Tisha's got good movement. She's quick. She's got good striking. But the problem is she doesn't have any sting on it. You know what I mean? Like, I think I've actually seen her kick someone high, like to the head. And it was more of a slap than an actual, like, powerful kick. So I don't know how she's going to back Gomes off of her
Mm.
is the issue. And I just think that if she doesn't physically hurt her, because Pennington finds a way to most of her fights go to decision anyway, and she doesn't really take a lot of damage because of her movement. So I think that uh, Gomes is probably just going to win based on ring generalship and trying to push the pace of the fight. But if at any point Pennington stands there with her, I think she's going to light her up. I think Gomes is going to light up Pennington. So I'm going to go with Denise Gomes to get it done, whether it's decision or finish.
Yeah, I'm going with Gomes too here. This fight really just comes down to the volume of Pennington against the power of Gomes. It comes down to the athleticism and speed of Gomes, the youth on the side of Gomes to the UFC veteran of Pennington here. I think that's what's going to separate the two. And I want to take youth here, but I will say, you know, Tisha Pennington's got great takedown defense. We've seen in previous fights with Gomes as well that she likes to mix in takedowns. She's kind of got away from the power in the right hand and fallen in love with mixing in wrestling in some of her fights, which I'm not a big fan of. She does train with a high level group of women over at the gym, which is eluding me at the current moment. But I think she's going to be well prepared for this fight here against Tisha Pennington. I just hope that she's able to land a big enough shot in each round in order for her to win rounds. Because this fight, to me, I think Pennington's going to have a lot more output. She's obviously got, a much better in terms of UFC pedigree, in terms of who she's fought. And I actually think this is a decent step up in competition here for Denise Gomes. A win over Elise Reed isn't necessarily a name that you think of as somebody that, oh, that's a creditable win. Whereas I think Tisha Pennington at this point, even at this point in her career, the last two fights she's been able to win inside the UFC, a win over Carla Esparza. And the way that I look at this matchup here is that if Pennington, is the one that's moving back, like Carlos said, Gomes is the one stalking, has her back up against the fence, and she's able to land sort of big shots. They're going to be the moments that the judges are going to remember. If this is a tit-for-tat kickboxing match where Pennington's able to land 2 or 3 to every one of Gomes, that's going to make this fight very, very close. And if Gomes decides to wrestle, I think she'll probably get tired. Pennington's got great takedown defense. I think that's going to wear on the gas tank of Gomes, but I do trust Gomes' ability to be able to strike and be able to just be that enforcer in there, getting the respect with the hands, but I don't necessarily think that Pennington's going to be able to do the same. So I think once Gomes realizes there's not a whole lot coming back on the way of the feet, I think she's going to be able to walk her down and have her way on the feet. But I do worry about this one. This one's kind of got, upset written all over it, especially sometimes in women's MMA. We've seen it happen in the past. Tisha Pennington's definitely no joke. She's definitely got enough skills. I agree with Carlos. She's not the hardest hitting 115 pounder, but she's got enough, experience inside the UFC and enough skills to, I think, at least pull off an upset here. Going with Gomes. And next up, we have Josh Hokit taking on Max Gimenis. Carlos, who you got in the heavyweight matchup?
I'm gonna take Hokit, the Incredible Hawk, or Hulk, however they say it, and I'm gonna take him. I think he's a bit more of an athlete. I think he's got the collegiate wrestling, so he doesn't have a big submission background, and the submissions that he tries to go for are the big strongman, submissions like Kimuras, Americanas, like the paintbrush stuff like that is what he's trying to do, and I just think that although he doesn't have like a big submission game, I do think wrestlers know how to like kind of uh, stifle some of the submission attempts from even high level, grapplers as well, like Gimenis here. And you know, I also believe that he's got the speed advantage. He's a little lighter on his feet now. Striking wise, you don't really have enough to see. You don't know how good he's going to be. You don't know how powerful the strike's going to be. But what I do think is if he throws something, even if he throws it like a fifth grade schoolyard kid with his eyes closed and he lands it, he's going to have enough power behind it. He's got the big legs. He's got the big shoulders. He's going to do some damage. Whereas Jimenez, I've seen him throw some strikes against some low level talent, and He's just a little slow, a little hulking in his movements, very clumsy, and but once he gets you to the ground, or once he's on his back, like he can be a problem at certain points. So on the ground, Hokit's going to have to be careful, and he's going to have to implement some ground and pound and some, in certain situations, stay safe, but look for those short elbows, look for those short punches on the inside. Go to the body, like dig to the ribs and then dig up top. Something, something just to keep Gimenis just um, distracted so he's not trying to set up the next move and the next submission, because once he gets him, somebody at his level can chain them together, and that could be a problem for Hokit. He may block one, he may block two, but he may not block the third one. So I'm going to take Hokit. I think he can get this done, but not confident, because although Gimenez is very slow, it's not like Hawkett's got enough ability to avoid these strikes, like see them coming. So he might get clubbed with something. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Not confident in this one at all. And the betting line to me is kind of crazy. You got sloppy heavyweights, an unproven 6-0 guy making his UFC debut from the Contender Series. As a 4-1 favorite here, you got Maxime Gimenez at about plus 300 at this point, which is it's kind of crazy to me when you think about it. We've seen BJJ guys come in and they don't have success because they want to lay on their back, but Carlos and I were talking about this one before we started to record it, and I'm right there with you that if this fight hits the mat, Gimenez is going to be live even off of his back here, and I do think that Hokit, with that wrestling pedigree, I think it'd be best served to keep this one on the feet and win it with the striking. He's got a lot of first round finishes with the hands. I do think he's a much more technical striker out of the two, and I agree with Carlos as well. If he does decide to say fuck it and wing it, or even hawk it, as long as he throws them ham hocks, in some sort of direction towards Gimenez's face, I think he can definitely win. But if he decides to mix in the grappling, gets lost in the sauce when it comes to the clinch game of Gimenez, that he even when you watch him in BJJ, he's pretty good at getting the clinch and kind of getting the trip and getting you to the ground. And I just worry here that, when you've got a 4-1 favorite UFC debut, he wants to win, he wants to finish his opponent. He might overextend and get taken down, and all of a sudden, you've got a much higher level BJJ practitioner on top of you. So I do think Jackson Wink, hopefully, obviously the gym that Josh Hokit is at is going to have him prepared for this one. I don't want him to be, all intimidated by the ground game of Gimenez. But when you look at Gimenez's MMA experience and not just his BJJ, he hasn't actually beaten anybody with a winning record inside the cage. So it does feel a little bit of confidence, but it's one of those ones. It's a sloppy heavyweight fight, 3-1 favorite. We might look at him for the best bets here, maybe pull off an upset, but I'm going to go with Josh Hokit here. Keep this one on the feet, land the strikes, and hopefully we get some sort of funny pun on the mic here for Josh Hokit to start off his UFC career. And spit on that thing. And next up, somebody who does like to spit on that thing. We've got Myro Bueno Silva taking on Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Carlos, who you got in this matchup?
I ended up taking Jacqueline Cavalcanti, and she's got long strikes. She's pretty powerful. She damages her opponents with them, kicks along or punches along. She prefers to box a little bit more. She does the knees and she has pretty decent takedown defense as well. And from what I've seen when she got taken down, which is few and far between, she did have like some decent sweeps. The only problem is the sweep that she used. You just can't tell if it was like she powered through it, or if, I mean, technically it was there, but she also tried to power through it as well. So I also don't know if Eek for getting off the bottom as well. But when she's against the cage, she does do the cage crawl pretty good, and she does post her hand and get her legs out and use the cage to crawl back up. So she does have the technical ability to do so. And the reason I'm saying that is if Silva can get this to the ground, that could be her only way to get this done. The only problem is Silva is very flat-footed. She's very slow. Her strikes are slow. She's very unathletic in a lot of her movements, but she's aggressive, so she's going to come forward, and that could be exactly what Jacqueline needs to get this done, because she's going to come forward, she's going to be game. If Cavalcanti can make the perfect reads and like the right amount of volume, she could actually get a stoppage in this one, because she has long hard strikes, and I think she can do a lot of damage to Silva. But you never know. Silva's a tough girl. Maybe she can muscle it because if she can get a hold on her and get some type of foot sweep, she can get her to the ground. That's where the problem is, and I don't know if she's going to be able to do that. Silva is pretty strong. I mean, she was a former contender for a title, so I think, and she's got some decent victories over some good grapplers as well. So I'm going to go with Cavalcanti. I think her movement is going to be a problem. I think her long strikes is going to be a problem. And it's not like Silva knows how to shoot. So when she comes in, she's pretty much going to reach in her way in. And that's going to be a problem because when her hands get extended, then she's just going to be eating punches on the way in. So I'm going to take Cavalcanti to get it done.
Yeah, that's a nice segue for me to talk about how I see this matchup too. That's exactly how I see it. I think Cavalcante's jab here is going to be, touching up Mayra Bueno Silva all night. I think the speed advantage here goes to Cavalcante. We've seen with the boxing as well. She's a little bit more crisp. And she can fight on the outside. She can dance on the outside. She can light you up with the jab, just touch, right hand. With Silva, she is a little bit, I think, especially at this point in her career, she's a little bit slower down now, 34 years old. I think if she can't get into a dominant position on the ground, she really just struggles in fights. We've seen wrestlers take her down and hold her down. And I think here that she's just going to be swinging at air. She's very aggressive. She will walk you down. I could see her being the aggressor, especially early in this fight, coming off of a 3-fight losing streak, looking to get back in the win column. This might be her whole career, especially with this weight move. But I just don't see a way that she's going to be able to get Cavalcante down, hold her down, and implement her BJJ or ground and pound. I think that she's going to be far too slippery. She's just going to dance around on the outside and outscore her here. And I think Silva's going to get frustrated. And I do think that Cavalcante probably has an underrated wrestling and grappling game here. And I do think that Mayra Bueno Silva's far too hittable. She always likes to take one to give one. And you see even in the Macy Chasson fight that she's happy to walk you down and trade and trust her power. But she also does, kind of have to get hit in order to land those shots. It's not like she's able to set them up. And I think Cavalcante is far too technical for her. I think she gets in the win column again here, keeps her streak going, keeps her wins going. And I think that's going to be an unfortunate 4-fight losing streak here for Mayra Bueno Silva. And next up, we have Jamall Emmers taking on Hyder, the Hurricane. Amil, Carlos, who you got in this matchup?
This one, all right, I'm going to make it right now. And I'm going to go with Amil. You know what I mean? I didn't have anything picked because it's a tough one. You know what I mean? Like Emmers has that reach advantage and little bit. I think it's a little bit of height advantage, but he's got the reach. And the thing with Emmers is that he can hit, but they're looping, and he always looks kind of sloppy, even when he's like not tired. He looks a little lethargic when he throws. Like he throws hard, but it's like the technique is a little off. He looks a little clumsy, and he looks tired. Like even when he's not. But Amil starts off good. He starts off technical, looks strong, comes out defensively not there, doesn't mind getting in a firefight, but in the beginning he'll move, he'll put his hands up, he'll try to block. Then he'll get tagged and then he'll go to war. And that's exactly what Emmers will do too, is that from start to finish, he swings wild and even his kicks, he's off balance, but he also is ready to go to war as well. So I just think, does Emmers get there first just because he has that little bit of reach advantage as Amil is coming in? Or does Amil actually get him in round 2, round 3 somewhere where Emmers is a little tired, a little sloppy? Because when Emmers throws punches, he throws it whether you're in range or not. So he's always whiffing and getting himself the little gas. So I'm going to go with Amil, and I think that as the later the fight goes, I think it's going to favor Amil, and I think that he could keep his technique a little tighter, a little neater, and can get it done, whether it's on the ground or on the feet. I think he holds it together better. I think he's a little bit more driven, and I think that the technical aspect of it and his aggression is going to get it done.
Yeah, I actually think this one's a tough one. I do think that there's a path where I could see Emmers winning it, but I am going to go with Hyder and Amil here. And when I look at the path to victory here for Emmers, we've seen in his previous fights where You go back to that Nate Landwehr fight where he was able to land on Nate early. Nate the train gets hurt. He does what he kind of does. He dogs it out. He gets in there. He gets hit. He gets bloody, and he kind of comes back at you, and he's able to outdog you. And I worry about that for Emmers here against a guy like Hyder or Amil, because Hyder Amil has that dog in him as well. He's always walking people down. He's always forward pressure. He's always take one to give one. And you see that, and even in his Delgado loss, that he's trying to walk Delgado down. He gets kneed and obviously finished, but he is the aggressor in a lot of his fights. And I do worry that if Hyder Amil kind of uses that kind of dog mentality here, he's able to break Emmers. And I do think Emmers is live early, which is the path to victory that I see for him. He is very athletic, and I do think that early in the fight he'll definitely have decent hand speed to be able to kind of throw a counter right hand. But I'm with you. I'm with Carlos as well. He tends to loop his shots sometimes. Hyder is there to be hit at times as well, but he likes to take one to give one. But I think as the fight progresses, providing that Amil doesn't get knocked out early with a counter right hand from Emmers, I think he can mix in that sort of pace, that pressure, use his cardio as a weapon. Obviously losing in his previous fight, losing his undefeated streak, but I think he comes in here with a dog mentality to sort of break Emmers. We saw it in the Nate Landwehr fight. We've seen it in the past as well. I think in Jack Jenkins' fight, where even though he won that fight, he did kind of slow down a little bit late in the fight. 36 years old as well. I think Hyder Amil has a little bit more upside at this point. And if you look at the recent wins as well of Jamall Emmers, Gabriel Miranda, not really a creditable win, a guy that really just plays jiu-jitsu off of his back, and Dennis Bazoukian, not UFC level in my eyes as well. So I hate to play MMA math, but I think when these two match up, I think Hyder's got a little bit more dog in him. I think he can mix in the wrestling as well, get Emmers tired, and ultimately I only see Jamall Emmers being live early in round one. So give me Hyder Amil here to get this one done. And next up, we have my boy, Christian Leroy Duncan, taking on Marco Tulio. Carlos, who you got in this one?
I took Marco Tulio in this one. I think the pressure on the feet, everything he throws is pretty hard. I think he's going to be able to back up CLD whenever he feels like it up against the cage. That'll probably be where he tries to clinch him, if he clinches him, because, Tulio, shooter bucks, they want to stand and bang too. But I do think that if he implements a little bit more clinch work, a little bit more grappling, even just to get it down to ground and pound, you know what I mean? I think that would benefit him a little bit more. Christian Leroy Duncan, what he wants to do, bounce around the outside, do a quick athletic spinning move, throw a couple kicks, keep his punches long. He doesn't want to get close. He doesn't want to get in tight unless it's to throw knees or elbows. I think that the way that Armen Petrosian versus Duncan ended up going is exactly how this is going to go. Petrosian, when he threw hard, he threw often, and it backed up Christian Leroy Duncan. And I also think that he implemented a little grappling just to cut the time, get a little break from throwing 100 miles an hour. Took Duncan down. Duncan really didn't have an answer for it to get back to his feet. And when he did, it took a while anyway off the clock. So I think that could be an easy outlet for Tulio if he wanted to go that route. I do think that if this stays on the feet, whether or not Tulio decides to add a little bit of grappling, I do think the power that he throws with, because he's throwing hard every time, I think that's going to keep Duncan backing up. I don't think he's going to come into that. Duncan's very athletic. He loves to bounce in and out, but the reason why he doesn't have a lot of pop on his power is he never commits to the shot. And the reason why he doesn't commit doesn't get hit, and I understand that. And if you commit too far forward, you're in the pocket, Tulio's going to tag you. So I think that whether it stays standing or he implements wrestling and gets it to the ground, I think Tulio's probably going to get the better of this exchange.
Yeah, Marco Tulio, he's impressed me. If you look at his last two previous performances inside the UFC octagon, not necessarily high-level guys, but he's looked good in those fights, and he's shown a good skill set. And I think that this is a big step up for him against Christian Leroy Duncan. I've had my differences in the past with Christian Leroy Duncan. And to me, I agree with pretty much everything Carlos said. Christian Leroy Duncan wants to bounce in and out at range. He definitely throws the straighter shots, but not necessarily anywhere near the power that Tulio possesses. And I think that Tulio has definitely shown in that Trayshawn Gore fight that he'll bite down on his mouthpiece, he'll trade in the pocket, and he's usually the one that comes out better on those exchanges. And if you see the fight with Gregory Rodriguez, obviously Rodriguez able to mix in takedowns, a very athletic, very physically imposing style that he has. I think Marco Tulio can take some a little bit of sort of how that fight played out and take some of those tools and implement it in his game here against Duncan. I'd like to see him get into the clinch. I'd like to see him, kind of force Duncan back, kind of make him the one that has to fight on the back foot. And I think Tulio can then help, to really just land his power shots on the feet. If he does get into the clinch, kind of wear on him a little bit, drain his gas tank, that will take away some of the athleticism and speed of Duncan here. And I think with Christian Leroy Duncan, that he hasn't necessarily shown that he can kind of get the respect of his opponents, especially if they're harder hitting and more physically imposing in there. And I think that's exactly what Tulio is. So give me Marco Tulio here. Be the aggressor, be the one moving forward, and ultimately maybe even land the big shot here on the feet. And I think that this is a good test for him, but I think it's one that he passes. And next up, we have Ricky Simón taking on Raoni Barcelos. Carlos, who you got in this one?
I wanted to go with Barcelos, the old guy who's just ripped, reminds me of myself somewhat at that age, but no, not even close. But I'm going to go with Simón, and I'm going to say youth is going to play a little factor in my decision. I'm also going to say that Simón can scramble. He can wrestle. Barcelos is going to want to wrestle. Now, Barcelos implements wrestling in everything that he does, so he's live. He's very dangerous. He's heavy-handed, so he's very dangerous because you don't know when he steps forward if it's going to be a takedown, if it's going to be a kick, if it's going to be a punch. You don't know what's coming. So Simón's going to have to be ready for that, and that's the thing when people fight Barcelos. He's been on a little bit of a streak. That's what's confusing is you don't know when he's going to take you down. You don't know when he's going to throw a bomb, and I think that's what's going to have Simón confused. I also think that Simón can throw something back and probably tag Barcelos. He does have the shorter, tighter punches. He does wing some wide hooks, but for the most part, he's a little quicker. He's a little bit more fleet of foot. He gets in and out of danger, or at least he can. And I think that the scrambles benefit Simón, and I think that on the feet, the actual technical part of the striking, the way it looks, is a little sharper from Simón, and I think he can get to the target before Barcelos gets to him. So I'm going to go with Simón with this one, but I wouldn't mind seeing an old dog, get the W in this one.
I'm going with the old dog. Give me Raoni Barcelos, man. I know what Carlos is saying, but I just don't really trust Ricky Simón, if I'm being honest. I mean, I know obviously the age is a factor here, 38 to 33, but when you look at Barcelos' last three fights, obviously win over Cody Garbrandt. He was able to beat Peyton Talbot with the wrestling as well. Impressive performance, which we picked here on the channel, was a plus 1,000 underdog. Christian Quinones, he was able to come back in that fight and ultimately find the submission. But his two losses, Kyler Phillips, top 15 guy, Umar Nurmagomedov, arguably the next best guy in the division after Merab. And when you go through and look at Ricky Simón's performances, a short notice step up for Cameron Smotherman. He was able to take him to a decision in a fight where it was pretty boring. He had to use some of the wrestling. I don't think he's going to be able to implement that same wrestling game plan against Barcelos. He's shown a high-level wrestling pedigree, I believe a national champion in Brazil in wrestling. And obviously he had that kind of fluke knockout. I don't want to say fluke because obviously it was a nice setup to the right hand, but a fluke out in the sense of he was on a 3-fight losing streak before knocking out Jared Basharat, who was obviously undefeated at that point as well. So obviously a loss to Vinicius Oliveira. The guy wasn't in the best place in terms of his career. So a win on short notice against Cameron Smotherman where he didn't get the finish along with a fluke knockout, to me does not spell he should be a favorite here over a guy like Raoni Barcelos, who's obviously on a 3-fight winning streak against still creditable level guys. And I think both guys possess wrestling. I do think that Ricky Simón's striking tends to be a little bit more looping. I do think that Barcelos does a good job of popping out the jab and kind of using that range a little bit better. And he doesn't look to be slowing down even at 38 years old. So give me Raoni Barcelos here. I think wherever the fight goes, I just believe in his ability to be able to make it scrappy, whereas Ricky Simón to me looks like the kind of guy where I think if Barcelos kind of pushes a pace here and he's still there in the third round, which he's proven he can in that submission victory over Quinones, that I think he can make it difficult here and maybe even break Ricky Simón. Give me Ronnie Barcelos here to get this one done as a slight underdog. And next up, we have Chris Taco Padilla taking on Ismael Bonfim. Carlos, are you going with the little bro? Or are you going with Chris Taco Padilla?
I'm going to take Taco in this one because I think Padilla is definitely not a bit. He's definitely more technical on the feet, defensively more aware. He fights a little bit more cautious. He's not quick to rush into the pocket, and he does take chances. He takes chances, but he takes them when they're there. He doesn't just take a chance to get it to create an opening. Whereas Bonfim, that's what he does. Whether your hands are up, he's trying to fight through that guard. If you're going to check the kick, he's going to throw it no matter what because he just wants to throw something. There's no setup to anything, and which is fine. You know what I mean? You can throw something, hurt somebody, that creates the opening. But against somebody like Padilla, who's defensively very technical, I don't think that's going to happen. I also think that Bonfim is going to try to have to. He's going to have to try to be explosive in this one if he wants to get a takedown. And Padilla's, I think his takedown defense is pretty solid and up against the cage because Bonfim's not going to take him down in the middle of the ring. I think that he's going to be able to get back up. I've seen him be able to do that also in the past very well. And I'm not going to say that Bonfim is a little overrated. I like the fact that he's aggressive. He's coming forward. He's ready to throw at all times. But I do think that when you're ready to throw at all times and someone's ready defensively to wait, look for the openings, look to counter, I don't think that's unless you are high volume and Bonfim at high volume, he's going to get gas. I'm going to take Padilla every time.
Carlos won't say it, but I will. Bonfim is overrated. Give me Chris Taco Padilla. And I just want to say as well, we are recording this on a Tuesday for you guys that didn't know. So it is Taco Tuesday. And I think Padilla mixes in the wrestling here. I think he backs up Bonfim. I think he takes the back. I think he finds the rear naked choke, very similar to that performance that he had against James Lontop. And I think with Bonfim that he's shown a weakness in the ground game, whether that be just rushing his get-ups or, getting taken down and, giving his opponent openings. And I think that Chris Taco Padilla, I think he has decent BJJ, very slick, very opportunistic submissions that he can definitely capitalize here. But he's no slouch on the feet either. We've seen with Padilla that, he has a nice timed elbow, which I think he had against, I'm just trying to remember the guy's name, Rong Zhu. In that fight where he was able to have a nasty step-in elbow. He times his shots very well. I think Bonfim's used to only being the hammer. He can't be the nail. And we've seen in his previous fights where he had that doctor stoppage against Salikhov, when he's getting backed up and he's getting things, kind of not go his way, I think that he kind of breaks. And to me, Chris Taco Padilla, he's happy to, stand and trade in the pocket. He'll mix in grappling. He'll look for submissions. And we've seen him go the distance as well. I think he's a very natural finisher. I think he's feeling himself right now as well. He's on a win streak. Bonfim, obviously the lesser of the two brothers. I think that his confidence is knocked, losing 2 of his last 3. Even his victory is over Vince from Hell Pichel, which at this point isn't necessarily the best win. And he wasn't able to get the finish there. So give me Chris Taco Padilla mixing in the grappling, rear naked choke. I think he takes the back after a poor get up here from Bonfim where he rushes it. Padilla takes the back and finds a submission.
Wish I could just be that easy to say he's overrated. It's too much hate online. I'm going to be a little bit cool about it. I'll be critical. I just can't do it. I can't call him. I can't say he sucks. But what I can say is I don't think he's going to win.
I don't think he sucks. I just think he's overrated. And next up, we have the king of Kung Fu, Muslim Salikhov, taking on Uros Medic. Carlos, who you got in this one?
Oh, boy. Okay, I'm going to go with Medic in this one. And again, I'm going to go with the youth factor in this, even though Salikhov is he's quick. He's got his spinning attacks where he times them. I don't know if you'll be able to see it coming, but um, I don't think he can pull that off on Medic. I think Medic fights too far outside sometimes. Uh, he keeps pretty good distance. Moves in when he's ready to strike, and then he's back out when he's circling around. Um, Slight height advantage, I guess. Reach advantage, not that big. I just think that it's going to be a little bit more of the athleticism, whereas Salikhov needs to kind of plant himself to get his moves going. Medic can do that whether he's like floating in or floating out, and I think that the movement is going to be where the issue is. I don't think Salikhov's going to be able to time exactly where Medic is going to be to do one of those big moves. Also, the punch that he landed, and I can't even remember the last fight that it was that we picked. The Brazilian guy that he knocked out. I was very
Carlos
high on him.
Leal.
But Leal, yeah, and I thought Leal was gonna bully him around the cage, and Salikhov dropped a huge hammer, and that was just a strike. It wasn't a spinning back fist. It wasn't a spinning heel kick. It was just that. So Medic just got to watch out with the return fire because Salikhov will put you out if you stand right in front of him. And Medic, his chin's been clipped a few times and he's been rocked. So I do think this is not to. Unfortunately, this is not an easy pick, but I'm going to go with Medic based on the fact that he does move, he does try to fight long, and I think he can do that and probably time Salikhov coming in.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for punishment. Give me the king of kung fu. I'm going with Salikhov here. It's a tough one. This one really is because he's been on a streak, but it's been these knockouts so that people obviously don't expect. So now people are obviously high on him, and obviously at 41, it's great to see 3-fight win streak. The king of kung fu, guy that's been around for spinning wheel kicks. I think it's most in the UFC. I want to say as well. And obviously, he's got all the credentials here on the feet. You could list the amount of pedigree this guy has when it comes to the kickboxing and the striking ability. But Uros Medic does have nice striking in his own. And I do agree with Carlos that I think he's going to be a little bit more defensively sound than Leal was in that previous fight. He kind of wanted to bull rush in and use his size and his strength, whereas this is going to be a little bit more technical. So I do worry that Salikhov, what's he going to look like in later rounds, which we've not seen recently because he's been knocking so many people out and kind of been on a little bit of a streak. He was able to go to a split decision with Santiago Ponzinibbio, but if you're going to a split decision with Ponzinibbio, it's like, what do you look like when the technical kickboxing match takes it up a notch against a guy like Medic? So he does have the height, a slight height and reach advantage as well, which could play a slight factor. But I'm going to go with Salikhov here. I just trust in the momentum. I trust in the confidence. I trust in the fact that he's got a little bit more in terms of his arsenal with the spinning attacks. I think Medic, if he was, pretty much a guy who we've seen guys take him down and submit him. And if that was in Salikhov's game, I'd feel really, really good about him in this matchup. But we know this is going to be striker versus striker. And I do think that the side, obviously, of Medic in terms of youth and slight height and reach is going to play a factor here. But give me Salikhov. I trust in the momentum. And as a slight underdog, why not throw a little sprinkle on the king of kung fu? And that brings us to the co-main event here. A very interesting co-main event. Very surprised about this one. We've got Matt Schnell, the ever-entertaining Matt Schnell, taking on Joseph Morales, the Ultimate Fighter winner. Carlos, who are you going with in this one?
I'm going to take Morales in this one. Now, I find Matt Schnell very entertaining. Danger, he can hurt you. And the reason why he's called danger is he can hurt you or he can put himself in danger as well. And that's what I think he's going to do in this is I think that he comes out and he fights very technical at first. He's very sound, uses the jab, throws some low leg kicks. If he wants to come inside, he cuts the distance. But once he gets tagged once or twice, then he starts going for, it's going to turn into a firefight pretty much. And in the brawl for all, I do think that Morales is going to be able to at least change levels, get a shot, and just control him on the ground. Maybe do some elbows work down there, knees on the way up. I do think that on the feet, I think I'm going to give the edge to Schnell. He does look a little bit more technical. He looks a little bit more controlled. His strikes aren't very wide. Morales, he is tight. He's starting to come into his own now from the what show was that? Oh, The Ultimate Fighter. He's starting to do a lot better. I think he's starting to put everything together very nicely. I just think that Schnell is going to get clipped with a couple of shots, and then it's going to turn into a firefight. And I think when it turns into a mess, Schnell can win when it's a brawl, but he ends up getting the worst of the exchange, and that's why he's so entertaining. So I'm going to take Morales to once this turns into a brawl, he's going to calm it down. He's going to get back to being technical. He's going to change a level, or he can get into a firefight too. He can hurt Schnell on the feet as well. So I'm going to take him. Like I said, not too confident just because Schnell on the feet is not he's not a joke. You know what I mean? He can swing wild and he can hit you. He can rock you. So Morales is going to have to stay sharp, but I'm going to go with, I'm going to take him. I think he gets there first. And I think that he stays composed when it turns into a brawl.
Yeah, the nickname Danger for Matt Schnell is definitely a very accurate nickname, and I couldn't agree more with Carlos's assessment here of the danger that Matt Schnell definitely possesses, especially in the hands. And I think he's very live on the ground for a lot of his opponents. But one of the things that I think it's been an eluding factor for him is the chin. We know that he gets knocked out a lot, he gets finished a lot, and Morales looked very, very good in his previous fight. That Ultimate Fighter win surprised me, as I think he was a 2 or a 3-1 underdog in that one. I know Carlos picked him. I picked Alibi in that fight, and he looked great. Morales was able to come in, pressure with the hands, get the takedowns. His wrestling looked good. He looked slick on the ground. He looked prepared for that fight, and I think if that Morales here shows up, he walks through. He absolutely dog walks Max Schnell. I think if he underestimates Matt Schnell here, he's definitely live to get finished because, like Carlos said, he does wing punches. He is live on the ground for a submission. But I think Morales, honestly, is going to be a step ahead on the ground in terms of positioning. I think he'll be fine if he wants to take this one to the mat. I think on the feet, as long as he minds his P's and Q's and he doesn't get suckered into a brawl and stays technical, he could definitely find the knockout as well. And I think at this point as well, 31 years old to Matt Schnell obviously being the senior, 35 years old, with all the damage and all the finishes that he's had to, kind of absorb at this point. I think Morales is live for a finish here. I think this is a nice matchup for him. And I think ultimately, wherever the fight plays out, he's going to be live for a finish. So give me Joseph Morales here in the co-main event. And as always, if you're enjoying the content here, hit that like and subscribe button as we break down the main event here. Randy Brown taking on Gabriel Bonfim. Carlos, who you got in the main event?
This was a tough one. I don't know if you were kind of going back and forth with this. I like Randy Brown just because he can keep the fight long and he's got good power. I wish he would implement a little bit more kicking for the fact that he doesn't like to go to the ground, but just to add another dimension to it, kick a little bit more often, try to get in the clinch, use those knees. You've got that height advantage. Make guys have to worry about what's coming back at them. Make them worry about every tool you got. But he does like to stay a little bit more boxing heavy. I don't like the fact that he kind of loops some of his shots too for a guy that has that much reach. He does lean very forward when he throws a strike, so he puts his head right there in harm's way sometimes. But to get to that target, you got to go through his strikes too. And Bonfim early, he's very technical defensively. He's good. I think he's gonna have the high guard. He'll be okay with Brown. I just think that the longer the fight goes, same thing like with his brother. I think he tends to fade, but unlike his brother, even when he gets tired, he can get takedowns. He could stay technically tight defensively sometimes. I just think that his output tends to go down a little bit more because when he gets you down, he doesn't really do anything with it when he's tired. I do think when he's standing, he loses the snap on a lot of his shots. Like they come out technically, they look good, they look short, they look tight, but there's not a lot on it. And I think that if you can get him to round two, midway round two, early round two, and force him to work round one into round two, I think you take a lot of the danger away from him. So can Brown do that? He's not that kind of guy. He doesn't do that. But once he gets tired, he still stays fighting long, and he does lean forward, and his hands are down, and his guard is wide. So I'm going to go with Bonfim to get this one done because I think as the fight goes on, he can sound. He can use the fundamentals better when he's tired. Um, it's a tough one because I think Brown could probably get the stoppage on this, but I'm going to go with Bonfim, and I'll stick with it.
Yeah, two for Bonfim, but I share the same sort of unconfident sentiments that Carlos has here in this matchup. I think Brown's live for an upset for sure, but The thing that kind of pushed me over the edge is that Bryan Battle fight. When Bryan Battle won that split decision, and he was getting, held up against the fence for that longer period of time, it kind of makes me think, Bonfim here at 6'1" to 6'3" of Randy Brown, that it is tough to get the taller guys to the ground at times. But I think if Bonfim shown, even in that Stephen Wonderboy fight, that he's going to look to be able to try to get you to the ground, he's going to implement that jiu-jitsu, and his top pressure is very good, that he could definitely come in here, get Brown up against the fence, and maybe get a trip takedown or some sort of body lock here. And once he gets you down, he's going to hold you there for the rest of the round, providing that he doesn't sort of overextend on ground and pound. But he's proven at this point that he knows what he is. He sticks to it, and I think his striking is ever improving. I give Randy Brown the edge in terms of the striking. I think he definitely has a little bit more pop. It tends to come with the kind of territory of having the long reach that he has in this division. But we've seen with Brown as well, he wants to mix in wrestling at times too, but I think that would definitely just get him in trouble here against Gabriel Bonfim. Definitely the better grappler, the better wrestler. But in the Apex, small cage definitely suits Bonfim as well, and his style of fight here against Randy Brown. I think it really just comes down to, can Randy Brown kind of catch Bonfim on the entries? I think Bonfim's going to pressure. He's going to be able to get the takedowns. But if Randy Brown's able to land, he definitely could, like Carlos said, find the finish and find the stoppage. But that's the only real path to victory I think he has, is just catching Bonfim as he's coming in with an uppercut or a step-in elbow, or maybe even a knee from a tall, lanky guy like Randy Brown could definitely put Bonfim out. But I'm going to say that Bonfim wears him down, gets to the takedowns, and ultimately, finds a finish late in the third or in the fourth round here. I think the fact that this is 5 rounds definitely can play a factor, because we don't know what Bonfim's going to be like later on. Remember the Nicholas Dolby fight? He got kind of exposed trying to go for the finish early and gassed. Maybe his output isn't a whole, in that great early in the first rounds, and Randy Brown wins a couple of early ones and sneaks one late. So I do think that Bonfim, this is going to be a telling thing here for a 5-round fight, but I believe that in his wrestling enough that he's going to be able to get this fight to the ground and ultimately find a late finish here. And before we wrap things up, we have to let you guys know what's coming on the channel. We've got the Dog of the Week, my favorite betting underdog here on the Ground and Pound podcast. Full highlight reel tape for there, along with our best bets video to put some money in your wallet. And before we wrap things up, Carlos, is there anything you want to say to the people?
Guys, just remember, if you like this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next one.
And we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace!
Peace.